After years in Congress, I never imagined my greatest battle would be with my own HOA, especially after they shot my service dog Charlie, claiming he was lowering property values. But when they finally learned who I really was and the power I held, their perfectly manicured world began to crumble. The only question left was whether justice for Charlie would come at the cost of my own career. I still remember the day I moved into Maple Creek Estates, my dream home with its pristine little garden, where Charlie, my golden retriever and service dog, could finally have room to play. He'd saved my life countless times during my darkest moments after returning from overseas. If only I had known that garden would become a battlefield. The first week was peaceful. I kept to myself, working remotely on housing reform bills that nobody knew about, just another homeowner trying to live quietly. Charlie helped me through my PTSD episodes, his calm presence keeping the memories at bay. To the neighbors, I probably looked like just another remote worker. Then came the first note, a pink slip of paper taped to my door with writing so furious it had torn through the page. Unauthorized pet, violation of HOA codes. I laughed at first. Clearly they hadn't done their homework on service animal laws. I reached for my phone to snap a picture when I heard that voice for the first time. You must be the new neighbor breaking our rules. Marching across my lawn was a woman with perfectly styled hair, a designer yoga outfit, and a face twisted with the kind of entitlement money can't buy. I'm Linda McAllister, HOA Community Standards Committee Chair, she announced, as though introducing herself as royalty. I kept my voice calm. Years of congressional debates paying off. Nice to meet you. I'm Daniel Carter, and this is Charlie, my service dog. I reached for Charlie's papers, but she was already shaking her head. We don't allow large dogs here. They destroy property values. Our HOA president, Deborah King, has very strict guidelines about this. Linda's eyes narrowed at Charlie, who sat perfectly still beside me. You don't even look disabled, she added coldly. My hand tightened on Charlie's leash. Not all wounds are visible, I wanted to say. Instead, I smiled. I understand your concern, but service animals are protected under federal law. I have all the proper documentation. She pulled out her phone, snapping pictures of my house, my garden, and Charlie. We'll see about that. This isn't over. Linda stormed off, her designer sneakers leaving little dents in my freshly watered lawn. That night, I couldn't sleep. Charlie sensed my anxiety, staying closer than usual. I'd faced down hostile foreign governments and argued bills on the House floor, but something about Linda's threat felt different, personal. While Charlie dozed beside my desk, I pulled up Maple Creek's HOA regulations, scanning for any mention of service animals. Nothing. They'd never even considered it. The next morning, I found my garden fence spray-painted with the word violation in bright red. Through my security camera footage, I watched Linda directing someone to do it at 6 a.m. The paint was still wet when I touched it, and Charlie's paw prints tracked red across the sidewalk. Exactly what they wanted. I was drafting an email to the HOA board when another knock came. This time it was Deborah King herself, clutching a thick folder of complaints. She barely looked at me, her eyes fixed on Charlie with disgust. Mr. Carter, she began, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. We pride ourselves on maintaining certain standards here. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable in another neighborhood. I felt Charlie press against my leg, grounding me like he always did during anxiety attacks. That's when I noticed Linda in the background filming everything on her phone, probably waiting for me to lose my temper. They had no idea who they were dealing with or the laws they were breaking. But for now, I needed to play this smart. Thank you for your concern, Deborah. I'll review these complaints carefully, I said, accepting the congressional poker face, the same one I'd used during tense committee hearings. By the way, does the HOA carry insurance for federal housing law violations? Her smile flickered for just a second. Behind her, Linda stopped filming. Neither of them knew it yet, but they had just started a war they couldn't win. As I closed the door, I heard them whispering frantically. Charlie looked up at me with those knowing eyes, and I scratched behind his ears. Don't worry, buddy. They have no idea what's coming. That night, more neighbors reported mysterious property damage to the HOA, all homes near mine. I watched through my window as Linda led Deborah around, pointing at houses and taking photos. My security cameras caught everything. The pieces were falling into place, but I had a sinking feeling this was just the beginning. What they did next would change everything, not just for me and Charlie, but for thousands of homeowners across America.
I woke up to the sound of a camera shutter clicking outside my window. There was Linda McAllister, dressed in her bright pink jogging suit, taking pictures of my front yard at 6:30 in the morning. Charlie's ears perked up, a low growl rumbling in his throat. It was the third time this week. "Gotta document all the dog poop that's ruining our property values," she shouted when she saw me. I hadn't even had my morning coffee yet. Charlie never left a mess. His service dog training was flawless. I knew this because I'd spent 2 years and over $30,000 getting him professionally trained after my last deployment. I grabbed my phone and started recording her trespassing on my property. Linda's face turned red as a tomato. "You can't film me. This is harassment," she barked, stomping her foot like a child throwing a tantrum. The irony was completely lost on her. Later that morning, I found printed flyers stuffed into every neighbor's mailbox about dangerous animals in the neighborhood, featuring a grainy photo of Charlie sleeping in my front yard. Linda had drawn red circles around his massive fangs, which was actually just him yawning. I kept one as evidence, adding it to my growing file of HOA harassment. My security cameras later caught her teenage son, Tyler, sneaking into my yard to plant fake dog waste that afternoon. The poor kid looked mortified, mouthing sorry toward my front door camera. I didn't blame him. Linda was the kind of mom who'd ground him for refusing. The real trouble started during my evening walk with Charlie. We passed the community garden I'd helped plant last spring. Linda was there with Deborah King, the HOA president, pointing at my tomato plants. "They're not regulation height," Linda insisted, waving a ruler around. "And who knows what kind of diseases that dog could spread to our vegetables." I stopped, pulled out my phone, and played them the recording from our last HOA meeting, the one where they had specifically approved my garden plans. Linda's face went through 50 shades of purple. "You're not allowed to record meetings," she screeched. "Actually, I am," I said evenly. "I checked state laws before I moved here." That night, I smelled something strange while making dinner. Charlie started barking frantically at the window. I rushed outside to find my entire garden wilting. Someone had doused it with industrial-strength weed killer. The tomato plants I'd grown for the local food bank were dying before my eyes. My cameras caught Mark doing it, wearing a black hoodie like some cartoon burglar. I called the police to file a report. Officer Martinez, no relation to Linda thankfully, arrived, took photos, and documented everything. "You know," she said quietly, "we've had 7 complaints about this HOA in the past month." She handed me your card with a knowing look. I added it to my file. The next morning, Linda had organized an emergency HOA meeting about property values. I watched from my window as neighbors filed into her house, some looking uncomfortable, others eager for drama. Mrs. Jackson, my elderly neighbor who adored Charlie, caught my eye and slowly shook her head as she passed. Later, she slipped a note into my mailbox. "They're planning something big. Be careful." I sent the footage from my cameras to an old friend at the local news station, not for publication, just for insurance. Then I sat down at my desk, pulled out my congressional letterhead, and began drafting a letter about discriminatory housing practices. My hands trembled slightly as I typed, but Charlie pressed his head against my leg, grounding me like he always did. That's when I heard the first rock hit my window. I looked outside to see Tyler McAllister, tears in his eyes, his mother's hand gripping his shoulder as she forced him to throw another. Neighbors stood in their driveways filming, none daring to intervene. The second rock shattered my living room window. I reached for my phone. Little did Linda know tomorrow's HOA meeting would have an unexpected guest, and this time I wasn't coming as just another homeowner. But as I watched Charlie trembling under my desk, traumatized by the noise, I wondered if I'd waited too long to reveal who I really was. The next evening, I walked into the HOA meeting room, my heart pounding as Charlie quietly guided me to an empty chair. The room fell silent except for Linda's loud whisper. "He's breaking the rules again, bringing that dog in here." I took a deep breath, remembering my years of training during heated debates in Washington. This wasn't my first fight, but it might be my most personal one. Deborah King stood at the podium, her perfectly styled gray hair and pressed blazer matching her rigid personality. She gave that same fake smile I'd seen too many times before. "Before we begin tonight's meeting," she said smoothly, "we have an urgent matter to discuss: unauthorized pets and property values." I felt every eye in the room turn toward me and Charlie. A few neighbors quickly looked away, shame flickering across their faces. They knew what was coming, but they were too afraid to stand up to the HOA board. I gently patted Charlie's head, drawing strength from his calm presence. Linda McAllister shot up from her seat, waving a stack of papers. "I have documented evidence of this dog urinating on my prize-winning roses. My children can't even play in our yard anymore because of their severe allergies." I had to hold back a laugh. Her kids had been at the community pool just yesterday, splashing around with the Watson's Labrador without a single problem. I stood slowly, pulling out Charlie's service animal certification and a copy of the Fair Housing Act. Charlie is a registered service animal, and under federal law— Linda's shrill voice cut me off. "We don't care about your supposed federal laws. This is a private community. We make our own rules." Her face turned bright red as she walked toward me, pointing her finger. "My property values have dropped 15% since you moved in with that mutt." The room erupted in chaos. Some residents started shouting about their own property values, while others tried to defend me.
Through the noise, I noticed Mark King, Deborah's husband, filming everything on his phone with a smirk. I'd later learn why that smirk would cost him everything. "If I may," I said calmly, my voice cutting through the noise like it did on the house floor. "I've taken the liberty of pulling our neighborhood's property records." I opened my laptop, connecting it to the projector. Actually, property values have increased by 12% since I moved in. The only decrease happened after Linda's unauthorized pool installation cracked her neighbor's foundation. The room went dead silent. Linda's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I wasn't done. I also have satellite images showing that Deborah King's new fence extends 3 feet into public land, which is why I've been getting citations about Charlie being off-leash in what is actually a public space. Deborah's face went pale. "This meeting is adjourned," she announced quickly, gathering her papers. But the damage was done. Other residents started raising their hands, wanting to share their own stories of harassment and unfair treatment. That's when Linda lost it completely. She marched up to Charlie, who sat perfectly still despite her aggressive approach. "This dog is dangerous. Look at how it's growling at me." Charlie wasn't making a sound, and everyone could see it. "He tried to attack my precious Bella just yesterday." I pulled out my phone, playing a security camera clip from my front yard. "You mean when your leashed Chihuahua charged at us while Charlie calmly guided me away?" The video played clearly for everyone to see. Several neighbors gasped. Deborah banged her gavel desperately. "This is unauthorized recording. You can't—" "Actually," I said, my voice steady, "the HOA bylaws only prohibit recording of private residences. Common areas are fair game." Years of reading legislative fine print had finally paid off. As the meeting dissolved into chaos, I noticed Mark slip out a side door, phone in hand, texting someone frantically. Charlie's ears perked up, sensing something I couldn't. If only I'd paid more attention to that detail, maybe I could have prevented what happened next. Linda stormed out, yelling over her shoulder, "This isn't over! You'll regret moving into my neighborhood!" Her words sent a chill down my spine, not because I was scared, but because I knew people like Linda and Deborah were exactly why I'd spent my career fighting for housing reform. They just didn't know who they were really dealing with yet. As Charlie and I walked home under the setting sun, I noticed several neighbors quietly taking down their "No Pets Allowed" signs. Small victories, I thought, but something in the air felt different, dangerous. Charlie's usually relaxed gait was tense, alert. He could sense what I was starting to realize. This wasn't just about a service dog anymore. This was about power, control, and what happens when someone finally stands up to bullies. I had no idea that tomorrow morning would change everything. I woke up early that Sunday morning to the sound of birds chirping. Charlie's gentle nudge against my hand told me it was time for our morning routine. The sun was barely peeking through the clouds, the grass still wet with dew. Perfect weather for Charlie's training exercises. As I stepped into my backyard, something felt off. The usual peace of our morning routine was broken by hushed whispers coming from Linda's yard. I tried to ignore it. We'd gotten used to her constant spying. Charlie stayed focused on his tasks just like he was trained to do. His golden fur caught the morning light as he helped me maintain my balance, a daily reminder of why he was so much more than just a pet. Then I heard Linda's back door slam. "You're filming this, right, Mark?" Her shrill voice carried over the fence. "We need evidence of this nuisance." I took a deep breath, choosing to focus on Charlie instead. We'd already filed 3 police reports about their harassment, and my lawyer was building a solid case. Charlie's ears suddenly perked up. He shifted his body slightly, placing himself between me and the fence, something he only did when he sensed danger.
I heard footsteps crunching on the leaves, moving along the property line where Linda McAllister had been complaining about my unauthorized garden bed. "Hey, your mutt is threatening my wife!" Mark King's voice boomed from behind the fence. I turned slowly, keeping my voice steady, the way I'd learned to during tense congressional negotiations. "Charlie is a trained service animal, Mark. He's not threatening anyone." Linda's face appeared above the fence, her phone already aimed at us. "We've warned you about this dangerous animal. Property values are dropping because of you." Her voice cracked with that same entitled fury I'd heard at every HOA meeting. I reached for my own phone, ready to record whatever false claims they were about to make. That's when I saw Mark step out from behind his garage, holding something that made my blood run cold. The morning sun glinted off the metal of his home security weapon. "Mark," I said calmly, raising my hands, "think very carefully about what you're doing." Charlie stayed perfectly still, his training taken over. Despite the tension, he did exactly what he was supposed to, keeping me safe, staying calm. "I'm the head of neighborhood security," Mark shouted, his face red with anger. "I'm protecting our community." Linda was still filming, her grin widening with every second. Everything happened so fast after that. A neighbor's car backfired in the distance. Linda screamed something about an attack. Mark's finger tightened on the trigger. I lunged for Charlie, but I was too slow. The gunshot echoed through the quiet morning like a crack of thunder. Charlie's yelp of pain shattered my world into a million pieces. My brave, gentle partner collapsed onto the freshly cut grass, his golden fur standing red. "Self-defense!" Linda shrieked, still filming. "We all saw it. The dog was aggressive." But her voice faltered as other neighbors began emerging from their homes, phones raised, capturing the truth of what had just happened. I cradled Charlie's head in my lap, my training keeping me clear-headed enough to apply pressure to his wound. His brown eyes looked up at me, full of trust even now. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had called it in. My hand shook as I pulled out my phone, pressing the emergency contact I'd hoped I'd never need. "Sarah, it's Daniel. Get the legal team, now." I heard Linda's sharp intake of breath as she finally recognized my voice, the same one she'd heard on C-SPAN just last week during a housing committee hearing. Mark's weapon clattered to the ground. But none of that mattered, not Linda's stammering excuses, not Mark's suddenly pale face, not even the approaching police sirens. All that mattered was the faint rhythm of Charlie's heartbeat beneath my hands, growing weaker by the second. As I lifted my brave partner into my car, I made two promises. Charlie would survive, and the people responsible for this would learn exactly why you don't mess with a congressman's service dog. Neighbors stood in stunned silence as I sped toward the emergency vet, leaving Linda and Mark to face the army of law enforcement swarming our once quiet street. They wanted a fight over property values. They were about to learn the true cost of their actions. But would Charlie survive long enough for me to deliver the justice he deserved? My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I sat in the emergency vet's waiting room, Charlie's blood still staining my favorite blue shirt. The ticking of the wall clock felt like torture as I waited for news. Every time the door swung open, my heart jumped, hoping for an update about my best friend. My phone buzzed. Sarah, my chief of staff, calling for the 5th time. I finally picked up, my voice barely a whisper. "They shot him, Sarah. They actually shot my dog." "Sir, you need to turn on the news right now," she said, her voice urgent. "Someone posted a video of the shooting on social media. It's everywhere." I pulled out my tablet with trembling fingers and clicked the first link she sent. There it was, shaky phone footage from a neighbor's second-story window showing everything. Mark with his gun, Linda screaming about property values, and Charlie's pained yelp that would haunt me forever. The video already had over 1 million views. The emergency room doors burst open. Deborah King stormed in, her designer handbag swinging wildly as she waved her phone in my face. "You're him? You're actually him?" Her perfectly made-up face had gone pale, mascara slightly smeared. "You're Congressman Carter?" I stood up slowly, drawing myself to my full height. Years of keeping my identity private in Maple Creek Estates had just crumbled. "Yes, Deborah," I said evenly, "I am. And you and your husband just shot a congressionally protected service dog on video." She stumbled backward, nearly knocking over a chair. But you never said anything. You let us think you were just another homeowner." "I wanted to live quietly, Deborah," I said, my voice low and steady, "to work on my housing reform bill without drawing attention."
I chose your community because the listing promised peaceful living," I said evenly. "Instead, you harassed a disabled veteran and his service dog for months." The doors burst open and Linda McAllister stormed in next, her face red with anger, but a flicker of fear in her eyes. "This is a trick! He's lying!" she snapped, but her voice cracked when she saw the news playing silently on the waiting room TV. My official congressional portrait appeared next to footage of the shooting. My phone buzzed again, messages pouring in from other members of Congress, the media, veterans groups, and disability advocates. Hashtag Justice for Charlie was trending nationwide. The young vet tech who had taken Charlie into the back appeared still in bloody scrubs. I rushed toward her, my heart in my throat. Deborah and Linda fell silent, finally realizing how much trouble they were in. "He's stable," the vet tech said softly. "The bullet missed his vital organs, but he'll need surgery. Dr. Patterson wants to talk to you about the procedure." Relief washed over me, but anger quickly followed. I turned to Deborah and Linda, now huddled near the exit. "I've spent the last year working on housing reform legislation," I said, my voice steady but cold. Now I'm adding specific provisions about service animals and HOA oversight. Your actions just became Exhibit A in congressional hearings." Linda's face crumpled. "But our property values, our community standards." "Your property values?" I laughed bitterly. "Check your real estate apps, Linda. News travels fast. Houses in Maple Creek Estates are already being listed below market value. Turns out, shooting a congressman's service dog isn't great for a neighborhood's reputation." Deborah grabbed her phone frantically, scrolling through Zillow. Her gasp told me she'd seen the plummeting prices. "We can fix this," she pleaded. "We'll drop all the complaints. We'll pay the vet bills." "It's too late," I said, pulling a folder from my briefcase. "This is what justice looks like." Inside were copies of every harassing letter they'd sent, photos of my vandalized Arden, and recordings of their discriminatory HOA meetings. "The FBI is already investigating," I added. "Interfering with a service animal is a federal crime." The vet tech returned. "Sir, Dr. Patterson is ready for you." I gathered my things, watching Deborah sink into a chair, her face in her hands. Linda was still frozen, staring at her phone as angry comments flooded the HOA's social media pages. As I walked through the doors to see Charlie, I heard Deborah whisper, "What have we done?" My hand rested on the door handle. I looked back one last time. "You tried to destroy my life and hurt my dog because you thought I was powerless?" I said quietly. "Now you get to learn what real power looks like. The power of the law you tried so hard to ignore." The next few hours would change everything, but right now, all that mattered was Charlie. As I stepped through those doors, I couldn't help but wonder, would saving him cost me everything I'd worked for in Congress? Or would this become the defining moment of my career? By morning, news vans lined our once quiet street like vultures. I watched from my window as Linda McAllister paced her front lawn in designer yoga pants, desperately trying to shoo away reporters while clutching her phone to her ear. The panic on her face was a stark contrast to her usual smug expression. Charlie's blood hadn't even dried on my back patio, and already their perfect world was crumbling. My phone buzzed again. Another text from my chief of staff. The story had reached national headlines. "Congressman's service dog shot by HOA board member." Social media was exploding with fury. I clicked through Twitter, watching the security camera footage I'd released go viral. The clear audio of Linda screaming about property values seconds before Mark fired the shot was damning. No amount of spin could save them now. A knock at my door made Charlie whimper from his bed. His bandaged side was a constant reminder of what they'd done. Through the peephole, I saw Deborah King wringing her hands. Her perfectly styled hair was now disheveled. I opened the door just enough to hear her stammered plea. "Congressman Carter, please, we can work something out. We didn't know who you were. Linda was trying to protect our community standards. Mark made a terrible mistake. What will it take to keep this quiet?" I felt a cold smile spread across my face. "Protect community standards?" I said. "Let me show you something, Deborah." I pulled out my tablet and opened the file my team had compiled. Here's every HOA violation notice in Maple Creek Estates for the past 5 years. Notice anything strange about who received them? Her face went pale as I scrolled through the data. every single complaint about pets, yard maintenance, and community standards had been filed against minorities, disabled residents, or elderly homeowners on fixed incomes. The pattern was impossible to ignore. "This isn't just about Charlie anymore," I said quietly. "While you were busy harassing my service dog, my office was investigating HOA abuse across the country. Maple Creek Estates just becomes Exit A." A commotion down the street caught our attention. Linda was now screaming at a reporter.
"Who dares to step onto her precious lawn?" Linda McAllister snapped at the reporter, her voice shrill and unsteady. "You don't understand. Property values are everything. We can't have dogs running around. It attracts the wrong kind of people." The reporter's camera caught every word. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. My phone buzzed again. The housing reform bill I'd been quietly working on for months was suddenly gaining massive support. Colleagues who'd been on the fence were now calling to co-sponsor. Funny how a viral video of HOA abuse against a congressman's service dog could change political winds. Deborah King was still standing there, trembling. "What do you want from us?" she asked. I handed her a thick envelope. "Here's your chance to do the right thing. Inside is my proposal for a complete overhaul of Maple Creek Estates governance, new board elections, third-party oversight, and mandatory civil rights training for all board members. Sign it now, or I'll add your discrimination data to my congressional testimony next week." She snatched the envelope, but her hands shook so badly she could barely open it. Behind her, I saw Mark King being led out of his house in handcuffs. The police had finally arrived to arrest him for animal cruelty and reckless discharge of a firearm. Linda was now crying into her phone, probably calling her lawyer. Charlie limped to my side, his tail wagging weakly as he watched the scene unfold. I scratched behind his ears, remembering all the nights he'd helped me through PTSD episodes. How dare they try to take him from me? A new text lit up my phone. Photos from a resident showing years of HOA documents being shredded in Deborah's garage the night before. More evidence for the investigation. The house of cards was falling faster than they could cover their tracks. Protesters had begun gathering at the community entrance, holding signs with Charlie's picture and demanding justice. Local news crews interviewed residents who'd been silenced by HOA threats for years. One elderly woman wept as she described being fined into near bankruptcy for having a wheelchair ramp. A Latino family showed documentation of being cited for cooking odors from traditional family meals. Deborah's hand trembled as she signed the documents. "Please," she whispered, "my husband's on the city council. This will ruin us." I took the papers, checking each signature. "You should have thought of that before shooting a congressman's service dog. Don't worry, you'll have plenty of time to think about it during the federal investigation." As she hurried away, I saw Linda being interviewed on live TV, trying to defend herself. "I had no idea he was in Congress. We just wanted to maintain our standards. Dogs reduce property values by 15%. The reporter cut her off. "Ma'am, are you aware that discriminating against service animals is a federal crime, regardless of the owner's position?" I closed my door, sitting down heavily next to Charlie. My phone kept buzzing, calls from major networks, other Congress members, disability rights organizations. Tomorrow, I'd deal with it all. Tomorrow, I'd start turning this nightmare into real change. But tonight, watching through my window as karma did its work, I held Charlie close and whispered, "We got them, buddy. We finally got them." Outside, another news van pulled up, and I couldn't help but wonder how many other HOAs across America were about to face their own day of reckoning. The doctor had said Charlie would never walk the same way again, but they didn't know my dog's spirit. I watched him take his first shaky steps in our living room, his golden fur still patchy from the surgery. The news vans outside had finally left, but the damage to Maple Creek Estates was permanent. Every time Charlie flinched at a loud noise, my heart broke all over again. Linda McAllister's perfect world was crumbling. I heard she tried selling her house, but nobody wanted to buy from the woman who helped shoot a congressman's service dog. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing with messages from other representatives and senators asking about Charlie. The story had struck a nerve across the country. Last week, I caught Linda trying to sneak into my backyard with her phone, probably looking for something else to complain about. But this time, I was ready. The security cameras I'd installed caught everything, including her attempt to plant fake evidence of dog waste. The police weren't as friendly to her this time. Deborah King, our former HOA president, sent me a letter begging to meet. She wanted to explain everything and make it right. I read her letter twice before letting Charlie use it as a chew toy. Their fake apologies meant nothing. I had uncovered years of their dirty work. Other homeowners started coming forward with stories about how Deborah and Linda had targeted elderly residents, single parents, and minorities with made-up violations. The media dug deeper into our HOA history. They found recordings of board meetings where Linda bragged about forcing a young widow to sell her house because her crying baby was a nuisance. Deborah had written emails about keeping certain people out of the neighborhood to protect our values. Their own words had become their worst enemy. My team discovered that Mark King, the man who shot Charlie, had been lying about his security credentials.
It turned out Mark King never even had a license to carry a firearm. As the HOA's so-called security coordinator, that little detail caught the police's full attention. Charlie's physical therapy sessions became the highlight of our weeks. Other dog owners in the neighborhood would stop by with treats and encouragement. Even Mrs. Jackson, who used to complain about every little thing, brought over homemade dog biscuits. The community was healing. But not everyone was happy about it. Linda McAllister tried launching a counter-campaign on social media, claiming she was the real victim. She posted edited videos of Charlie barking, trying to paint him as aggressive. Unfortunately for her, my security footage showed the truth. Linda deliberately agitating him through the fence. Her followers disappeared faster than the neighborhood's property values. The most surprising support came from Linda's own teenage daughter, Emma. She visited one afternoon, tears in her eyes, to apologize for her mother's behavior. She had been secretly recording Linda's HOA meetings for months, disgusted by how they treated people. Emma's evidence became crucial for the federal investigation. Last night, I watched Charlie play with the neighbor kids for the first time since the shooting. He still limped, but his tail wagged like crazy. A reporter asked me if I'd consider dropping the charges if Deborah and Linda apologized. I looked at Charlie,
remembered the blood on his fur, the terror in his eyes, and the sleepless nights that followed. Some things can't be fixed with just sorry. The old HOA board office now stood empty, their precious rule books gathering dust. The interim resident council found documents showing that Deborah King and Linda McAllister had been funneling HOA fees into their personal accounts for years. They thought they were untouchable in their perfect little kingdom. They never expected a congressman and his three-legged dog to bring it all down. Tomorrow, Charlie has another vet checkup. His recovery is slow, but he's teaching me something new every day about resilience. As I sit on my porch watching the sunset, I see Linda packing boxes into her car. Her house finally sold at half her asking price. Sometimes karma has a way of setting things right. But as I glance at the certified letter on my desk from her lawyer, I can't help but wonder if this fight is truly over, or if she has one last desperate move planned.